Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Danny Phantom. I hope you guys are all doing extremely well. We got a really interesting weekend ahead of us. So Terrestrial Festival officially comes out tomorrow in Japan, December 6th. We've got all of our booster boxes coming early next week, so those are all getting shipped tomorrow. We should get them on Monday. Tuesday, we'll be shipping everything out starting on Monday. We're going to open up some Terrestrial Festival next week. I'm really excited for the set. I think it's going to give us some good insight to Prismatic Evolutions. I think we are going to try and attempt to build a master set to give away. We give away a master set every single English set release, but we've never done one for Japan before. But I think it will give me a good understanding of what to expect for our Prismatic Evolutions giveaway come January. So we do that every single set release, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That's what you have to do to win. You have to be subscribed to the channel, then you'll have to like and comment on a video that we will unveil in the near future, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm very excited about that. But before we jump into Terrestrial Festival coverage, I wanted to look at the market because it's a very interesting market this week. The Pokemon card market is very interesting because of the Black Friday sales, all the deals that went on TCGPlayer. And if you've been watching the channel for a little while, especially last week, I talked about the false market that's going to be established when it comes to some singles, some sealed product, specifically on TCGPlayer, because they did offer this cash back, this store credit incentive to buy on TCGPlayer over the past weekend. That incentive went on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and even Cyber Monday. So there was an opportunity for you to go on TCGPlayer as just a normal buyer and purchase cards, purchase sealed items, and you would get 10% store credit that you could then use on a future purchase on TCGPlayer. If you were a subscriber to TCGPlayer, which costs a small monthly fee, you were able to get 13% store credit for future orders with TCGPlayer, which is a significant amount, especially when you factor in like the Pikachu EX special illustration are selling for, let's say, $400 at the time. $400, it's not, it wasn't, but let's just say it was. 10% of that is $40. So it's basically making that Pikachu EX $360, which is a little bit easier on the wallet. Still not great, but a little bit easier on the wallet, and then you can use that $40 for future spend on TCGPlayer if you plan on spending it anyways. But because of that, you have a lot of Pokemon cards. That coupled with the idea that this Pokemon hype has returned, there's this giant resurgence as far as interest level goes, means that a lot of Pokemon card singles were really flying off the shelves, so to speak, on TCGPlayer, because a lot of buyers had this incentive of getting this store credit, and because of that, there was a lot of cards that may not have normally sold, selling for prices above market price, and then all of a sudden new market prices are established. So we're going to look specifically at illustration rares today, specifically at 15 different illustration rares to get an understanding of where things are. And it's nothing that I think you guys should go out and buy right now, but hopefully give you an understanding of maybe when you should pull the trigger on buying some illustration rares in the future, and also some interesting information as far as what do we expect from these cards moving forward. Are these cards going to retrace a little bit? What should we expect in the near future? So I'm going to flip you guys around, and I think like everything, we should start out just kind of talking about pull rates, especially as it pertains to illustration rares, because that is like the one area of the rarity department in Scarlet and Violet that hasn't changed at all. It's pretty much been the same ever since Scarlet and Violet base. Every single booster box, so every single 36-pack sample size, you're going to get about 3 illustration rares per booster box. It's a little bit less than that. It's like 2.8. You'll open up some booster boxes that only have 2, but for the most part, it's every 12 packs. Every 12 packs, you're going to pull 1 illustration rare. And because of that, let's say you open up Paldean Fates. Paldean Fates only has 3 illustration rares in the set. So because of that, every 12 packs, you're pulling 1. That means if you open up 100 packs of Paldean Fates and 100 packs of Scarlet and Violet base, you won't have all of the Scarlet and Violet base illustration rares, but you will have multiple copies of all of the Paldean Fates ones. That's why it seems like every single time you're either getting a Pawmi or you're getting a Palafin, and that happens because there's only 3, but illustration rare pull rates didn't change. Now, we're only looking at pull rate data for the main series sets. We're not looking at the specialty sets, but I do believe it is going to be the same if we really kind of added everything up and combined Shrouded Fable, Paldean Fate, Scarlet and Violet 151, looked at all the sample sizes, and we're like, okay, that is still 3 illustration rares per main series set, but we're just focusing on the specialty set because that's the only data we're looking at, or we're only looking at the main series sets because that's the only data we're looking at in this presentation. So what I did here is, and this is interesting because pull rates have stayed the same. That means technically, it is a little bit more difficult to obtain specific illustration rares from specific sets, especially the ones that are bigger. So we look at Scarlet and Violet base, for example. There's 24 illustration rares in Scarlet and Violet base. That means if you pull perfectly, and you won't, there's going to be variants. You're going to pull duplicates, you're going to pull triplicates before you pull a single, let's say, Drowsy illustration rare from Scarlet and Violet base. But if you pull perfectly, you should pull all 24 of them, or 24 in total, within 288 packs. So it'll take you 288 packs to do that with Scarlet and Violet base. However, Paldea Evolved, a much bigger set, more bloated. This is our biggest set in Scarlet and Violet so far, with 36 illustration rares, 432 packs to pull all those. That means the Magikarp, which is the most expensive illustration rare, is technically more difficult to pull and harder to pull than every other, like every single Paldea Evolved illustration rare is going to be more difficult to pull than every single other set, because the pull rates stayed the same throughout the Scarlet and Violet generation. And because of that, since there are more, it is going to take you more packs to open. I guess I shouldn't say more rare, because we don't know how many printings have happened of each of these. We don't know the exact amount of packs that have been distributed or anything like that. But it is going to be more difficult to pull all 36 or a specific individual illustration rare from Paldea Evolved. I hope that makes sense. So the Magikarp, a little bit more, it's going to take more packs to open that than it is going to take any other set from Paldea Evolved. But the same can be said for the Sprigatito, the same could be said for the Mousehold, the same could be said for the Quaxley, all those illustration rares from Paldea Evolved, because they're all going to have the same pull rate of 1 out of 12 packs. But since there's 36 in the set, 36 illustration rares means it's going to take you about 432 packs to pull a specific, unique, individual illustration. Obsidian Flame is much easier. Only 12 illustrations. This is our smallest main series set throughout Scarlet and Violet. That's why it feels like when you open Obsidian Flames, I know it only takes you like 7 booster boxes to master the entire set of Obsidian Flames. I know that seems like a lot, but compared to other sets, that's nothing. So 144 booster packs will give you all of the illustration rares from Obsidian Flames. Paradox Rift, much closer to what we saw from Paldea Evolved. There's 34 illustration rares in there, so that means it's going to take 408 packs to pull a specific unique one. Let's say you're chasing that Steelix, or you're chasing that Groudon. It's going to take about 408 packs to pull it, which makes it closer in difficulty to pull to that Magikarp, or to that Mousehold, or to that Quaxley, for example. Temporal Forces, Twilight Masquerade, even Surging Sparks, those are much more on par with what we saw from Scarlet and Violet base. Temporal Forces is 22 illustration rares, so that means a specific, unique, individual illustration rare will take you about 264 packs to pull. Twilight Masquerade, there's 21 illustration rares, so if you're chasing that Eevee, it's going to take you about 252 packs to pull it. Stellar Crown, there's only 13, so much closer to what we saw with Obsidian Flame. So if you're chasing that Bulbasaur, or you're chasing that Squirtle, it's only going to take you about 156 packs to pull it, as opposed to that Eevee from Twilight Masquerade, which is 252. And then Surging Sparks, 23 illustration rares in that set, so about 276 packs to pull that specific, unique Cerulege, or Latios, or whatever illustration rare you might be looking for. So it is important to note illustration rares and pull rates, because it does go to show you the difficulty as far as how many packs it's going to take to pull, and that might or might not impact the price in the future. Obviously, that's something that you can kind of contemplate in your mind. But if we look at the top 15 illustration, well, not the top 15, but some illustration rares that have made a lot of noise over the past really couple months, especially, we're going to start out with this Magikarp, which is the #1 illustration rare in Paldea Evolved. Obviously, we went through a series of time where it was slowly climbing, and that was at the end of last year, up until about March of 2024. It was a $50 card. It did jump up to about $80 in March of 2024. And then when we went through buyout phases at the beginning of summer in May and June, it did jump up considerably, almost to $150 right there. You can see that in the middle of June. Then it retraced, like many of those other buyouts started retracing. But now since September of 2024, look what it's done. It is just absolutely exploded in price. It's jumped all the way up to $188.79, which is an all-time high for that Magikarp. It's up 242% over the past year. So this Magikarp making a lot of noise and continuing to just kind of destroy the mantra of illustration rares not being that expensive. This is more expensive than the majority of alternate arts in the Sword and Shield era, which is absolutely crazy to think about. If you look at the Eevee illustration of this one from Twilight Masquerade, we only have about 6 months of data, and Twilight Masquerade was the oldest set, or the newest set I went back to. I didn't pull any data from Surging Sparks, or Stellar Crown, or like I said, any of the specialty sets, because the market hasn't really been super established yet, since they're still all fairly new. The Eevee's been relatively up and down, because it did go through some phases of popularity and buyouts and things like like that. You can see in June of 2024, when Twilight Masquerade released, it was right around that $43, $44 mark, jumped up above 60, hit that high point, that 6-month high of $61.93, and then fell down in August, fell down to that low point of $41.12. Now it's a pretty steady climb, especially over the past couple months. It's sitting at $61.93 right now and continuing to climb. So you're seeing these large amounts of purchases last week because of Black Friday, and that's what's going to be interesting, is tracking how the market performs over the next several weeks, because as more and more products hit the shelves, get ripped, especially during Christmas time, more and more products are going to get ripped, and then extras of these are going to be sold on the secondary market, which is probably going to bring the price down a little bit, and they'll show us which of these illustration rares are actually having natural growth, where it might be more of a false market just because of the hype and because of the additional sales that Black Friday and Cyber Monday were bringing at TCGPlayer. But now it's sitting at $61.93, very close to its, that is just above its 6-month high. So about 48% growth over the past 6 months is really strong. Ralts from Scarlet and Violet base. There's a lot of Scarlet and Violet base illustration rares on the move right now, and Ralts is one of them. December of 2023 up until June of 2024, relatively flat. This is that storyline card that everybody loves. There's so many people who really love the storyline cards. The Curlia is also doing really well. I didn't highlight this one in this presentation because we're already talking about the Ralts, and the Ralts is doing a little bit better. So this one's up about 118% over the past year. It did level out after the buyouts that we saw in June. It did level out for a few months, and it didn't really retrace as much as what we saw from some of the other alternate arts and things like that got bought out. But you can see an increased amount of sales over the past couple weeks. Now it's jumped up to $21.22. That's an all-time high for this Ralts right here, and continuing to move north. The Groudon from Paradox Rift, we briefly touched on this one before. In March of 2024, this was sitting at its 1-year low of $22.42. Now, not too long after the set came out. Remember, Paradox Rift came out in November of last year. March of 2024 then started really gaining a lot of momentum, a lot of steam, and it wasn't like there was a huge amount of sales that happened. It was pretty normal, and it just jumped up like crazy because the demand was so big for it. It jumped up to about $64 and then started falling a little bit more in September of 2024. It was back below $50, and now it has increased again. So it's up to $65.84 right now. That's a 1-year high for this card. It's up about 165% over the past year. So very strong growth out of that Groudon. The Ninetales, remember, we talked about Obsidian Flames having the easiest pull rates when it comes to illustration rares because there's only 12 of them in the set. So about 1 out of 144 packs to pull this Ninetales. Beautiful card. Absolutely gorgeous. Same artist who did the Hisuian Zoroark V-Star from Crown Zenith. Beautiful, beautiful artwork. You can see trending down a little bit in March of 2024. It actually hit that low point of $5.58, then started to gain a little bit of noise like what we saw from the buyouts that happened in June, hit about $12 and then leveled off for the next couple months, much like what we just saw from that Ralts. And then really October, November started gaining a lot of ground, and it's jumped up about 193% over the past year. So it's sitting at 1928 right now and continuing to climb. The Ghastly is starting to move upward. This one is from Temporal Forces. We're looking at 6 months of data on this one. Did go through a lot of buyouts at the beginning, a lot at the early stage. It was up and down. There were a lot of videos that were kind of recorded about it. In June of 2024, it hit that high point of $33.71, and then it did kind of fall apart. And you can see not as many sales happening on a weekly basis. I think a lot of people kind of started moving to the Japanese equivalent because it was so much cheaper. In September of 2024, it hit that 6-month low of $20.19, and then really started gaining a lot of ground. So it's still down about 4.5%, 5% over the past 6 months, but it's getting closer and closer to that 6-month high, sitting at $28.70. So definitely closer to its 6-month high than its 6-month low. Oh, we are going to talk about the Curlia. Okay, the Curlia, the second half of that Ralts line, Ralts Curlia Gardevoir line, that storyline. You can see, obviously, Curlia a little bit older now. There's a baby in the picture. Very cool story that it's kind of telling, and then obviously the special illustration where Gardevoir kind of fills it out, but it's watching a Pokemon kind of grow with a family, which is really neat, much like what we saw from that Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard line. We've seen it with the Tepig line before, all the way up to Emboar. Very cool stuff. In December of 2023, sitting at $7.15, and it's been relatively steady growth ever since then. It did level out from December of 2023 up until about April of 2024, and then started taking off and never really slowed down. So now it's up about 83% over the past year, sitting at $15.13 and continuing to trend upward. Here's the Sawsbuck. There's two different ones, the Sawsbuck and Deerling. These connect together to make a very cool artwork. This is from Temporal Forces. $7.29 is your 6-month low, which it hit in June of 2024. Relatively level. You're not seeing the buyout on this one like what we saw from some of these other ones, although the Temporal Forces did come out a little bit later. And then in November of 2024, it really just started taking off. It's up about 121% now over the past 6 months, sitting at $16.32, and again, continuing to climb. Same kind of growth pattern from the Deerling, which is the other half of that. The Marrow from Paldea evolved. This one has done really, really well, especially over the past couple of months. You can see slow growth from March of 2024 up until about August of 2024. In March, it was at its one-year low of $7.02. It did get just above $10 in July, and then retraced a little bit into September before it started really taking off, up about 150% now over the past year, with the majority of that damage done over the past few months, sitting at $20.50 right now and continuing to move north. Here's the Plusle. I can't really say that word. I can't really say that Pokemon, but this one and the other one that I can't say, which is the Minin, those are both really taking off as well. This is the Plusle right here. In March of 2024, it was sitting at a one-year low of $5.23. This is from Paradox Rift. It did get bought out. It jumped up like crazy. You can see some abnormal sales happening right there in August of 2024, where it did jump up in price, and then it retraced in September of 2024 back down to about $9, but then started taking off again, and now it's up about 168.5% over the past year. It already was continuing to grow. We just saw a blip and then a retrace a little bit to kind of slow down the growth pattern, and now it's taking off again at $15.30, and again continuing to trend upward. Here's the Drowsy that we were talking about before. Beautiful card. This is one of my favorite illustration rares from the entirety of the Scarlet and Violet era. This one's been on steady growth pattern ever since really release. You can see in March of 2024, it was sitting at $4.64. Really kind of goes to show you the best time to buy illustration rares might be not too long after a set releases, because there is going to be a lot of quantity kind of hitting the market. And then as less and less people start opening or stop opening that set, that's when you start seeing some of these illustration rares really taking off, which is a little bit different than what we expect out of the special illustration rares, what we're used to with alternate arts and things like that. But this Drowsy has done really, really well. It's up about 221% over the past year, sitting at $14.94 right now, which is just off of its one-year high, which it hit a couple weeks ago of $15.03. The Cleffa, also from Obsidian Flames, has been relatively up and down. It did have a buyout that happened a little bit earlier. You can see some abnormal sales happen at the beginning of April, where there was over 200 that sold on a weekly basis, which is about double of what we're used to seeing. In March of 2024, it was sitting at a one-year low of $4.17. Then it jumped up to that $8 mark, and it was relatively flat all the way up until recently. Over the past few weeks, it took off and went up to the next level, jumped up about 149%. So it's sitting at $10.40 right now and continuing to climb. So doing really well. The Armoroge from Scarlet and Violet base has also made a lot of noise over the past couple weeks. This one has also gone through a couple of buyout phases. You can see in June of 2024, there was a lot of sales that happened, but it didn't really impact the price because there was enough quantity on the secondary market that it stayed pretty level, and people weren't ready to buy at the increased price point yet, but now they are, and that's why we're seeing the market price start really shifting upwards. In September of 2024, that's when it was really at its one-year low of $3.52, and since then, a lot more quantity of sales, and it really started taking off. It's up about 93%, with the majority of that damage happening over the last really few weeks, sitting at $10.32 right now and continuing to grow. Here's the Slowpoke from Scarlet and Violet base, another really cool artwork, relatively flat from December of 2023 all the way up until September of 2024. You can see there was a brief period of time in April where it did hit that one-year low of $5.92. Otherwise, it's been right around between $7 and $8. Now it's taken the next step forward, up about 65% over the past year, sitting at $12.52 right now. The Sprigatito from Paldea Evolve. There's a lot of Paldea Evolve that's making a lot of noise right now. In February of 2024, it was sitting at its one-year low of $8.01. It's basically doubled in price since then, with some strong growth. It did retrace a little bit in October, but then took off again, up about 72% over the past year, sitting at $17.51 right now. So those are the illustration rares. We obviously don't have illustration rares in our next set. Prismatic Evolutions is not going to have illustration rares, which is very interesting. There's going to be Pokeball Reverse Hollows, and there's going to be Master Ball Reverse Hollows, which are supposed to be filling the space when it comes to those illustration rares. You will still have a lot of special illustration rares that you have to collect, but that might really make people forget. I don't know, it's going to impact the market some way, and then I'm sure the illustration rares will return with our next set, our partner set, which is expected to release in March. That's the next main series set release, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Make sure to leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you think this is more of a false market and these are going to retrace a lot, I do think some of these are going to come back down in price a little bit, but we might see new markets established, especially now that there's a lot more attention to Pokemon, a lot more people collecting Pokemon cards right now, you may see some of these start growing a little bit, and you may see some of the other ones that haven't been touched yet start growing as well. So definitely a time to kind of look at illustration runners, look at which ones you're missing, and maybe now's the time to start picking some of those up. So I hope you enjoy the content. If you do, please hit that subscribe button down below, leave a like, leave a comment. It goes a really long way for the algorithm, but most importantly, thank you just for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. You guys are absolutely amazing. I love you guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another video. Until next time, peace.